Dick Anderson is the Fulton County manager. Sir, thanks again for coming back.
Thank you, Shania, for having me back. I really enjoy being able to speak with you.
Well, Mr. Manager, we just heard from the chairman about his thoughts on the election cycle, and he thanked many county employees. You were leading the team in this effort. Who all collaborated for this, and what did you learn?
Well, elections was an all-consuming effort, and I think as it came together and we saw the media from all over the world and the United States, obviously, here in Fulton County, waiting with bated breath to see the results, kind of underscored why it was all-consuming. And I would just say, first and foremost, I've never been involved in anything that represented more of a turnaround from where we were in June to where we were in November. And perhaps the best indicator of that was as we surveyed voters leaving our sites in November, what we saw was over 95% of them rated the experience as very satisfied, and 5% rated it as satisfied. That's a phenomenal rating in any dimension, but certainly in voting. And I think as I think about all of the innovations that occurred, whether it was mobile voting sites, the Fulton County Votes app, the drop boxes, an absentee process that really worked this time and was able to handle multiples of what the absentee volumes had ever been before. I start with the dedication of Rick Barron and his entire team. I mean, truly, that team worked night and day and never gave up, never gave in, despite many obstacles. When I think of the COVID-19 outbreak in the warehouse that actually impacted 25 of our 60 employees, the pipe break at the State Farm Arena that impacted absentee voting. Those sorts of things could not be anticipated, obviously, but they were overcome, and they were overcome by a set of employees that are completely dedicated to this task. In addition to that, as I mentioned to the Board of Commissioners, there was a gang of three, and the gang of three was Bridget Bailey, Mike Rowicki, and April Pye, and they really stepped in from their normal jobs and assisted with a global planning effort coming out of June that looked at every detail involved in our election operations, from staffing to how the equipment was distributed to anything that we could do to make the voter experience more satisfying. And as you can see, it fundamentally worked. But those three folks called on virtually every department in Fulton County. I'll name just a few. Dream, as an example, I called it the midnight ride of Paul Revere, when a moving company failed to deliver on the day before voting. Literally, Dream stepped in and staffed and operationalized a program that moved all of that equipment to where it needed to be and did it by midnight that night, the day prior to election. That truly could have been a disaster without the help of Ellis Kirby, Joe Davis, and their entire teams. Likewise, technology was a huge, complicating factor. This configuration that we have is more complicated, and our IT department under Glenn Melendez and all of their staff, along with contractors that we brought in, where we put a technician on every site, really made this work smoothly, and the technical problems simply were not there. Likewise, we looked at security of our sites. So both Chief Yates as well as Matt Kallmeyer and their staff in emergency management did yeoman's work to ensure that the sites were being monitored, that police officers were actually available for each site, and that no significant events occurred, which was, again, just a phenomenal effort. Speaking of sites, many of our sites were libraries. So not only did Gail Holloman and their staff do great work staffing elections, but their libraries themselves were voting sites. And I think those sites worked flawlessly. Again, as I continued to just think down the number of folks that were involved in this effort, it's phenomenal. One I would also take note of that you wouldn't necessarily expect, but the Board of Health stepped in. Both Dr. Paxton and Dr. Holland got personally involved as this COVID-19 outbreak raged and set up quickly a strike team that went to our warehouse, worked with them, again, to institute rapid testing, ensured that we had proper procedures in place for social distancing. In fact, we moved the entire operation to the Georgia World Congress Center literally overnight to accomplish that. But the Board of Health being with their leadership, personally involved in this, made all the difference in the world. Lastly, I'd make note of 2 or 3 other things. As I said, there was worldwide public relations interest, and we have a master in Jessica Corbett at public relations. And I think even this tested every skill that she's ever had, and she handled it wonderfully.
And I realize there is still more work to do with the election runoffs and the closeout, but there's also another important story that is ongoing, this pandemic. The county had made some strides in our testing and trends. However, now it appears that nationwide there is a new wave of cases and even deaths. How will that impact the county's planning and ability to continue with its phased-in opening approach?
Yes, well, the COVID trends are still challenging. We've moved from a low of 64 cases a day now to over 130 a day. We also have seen the test positive rate when someone tests in one of our facilities or in the hospitals go from a low of 3.5% to just above 5%. So both of those trends are challenging, as we've said before. The good news is we have not seen a huge spike in hospitalization. So we still have over 700 beds vacant in our hospitals, and about 200 or so they are occupied by patients who have COVID-19. However, when we look forward, we do have projections that show those cases worsening and the number of hospitalizations worsening through these winter months. We just did a public service announcement with Dr. Paxton that really emphasized that winter is coming, and I thought that was a very apt message for all of our citizens to continue to do all of the things that they know to do to inhibit the spread of the virus, while we continue to test, and test, by the way, at a level that by the end of the year we will have administered over 1 million tests. And again, I want to emphasize how important that has been to delivering an outcome for Fulton County that is much better than where we started in March or April, when we occupied almost 20% of the total cases in Georgia. We're now below 8% of the total cases in Georgia. And most importantly, the death projections emanating from that are 1/2 of what they would have been otherwise. So all of our efforts have accrued to that benefit. The other thing that we're hopeful about as it relates to this, of course, is an overall vaccine. And there's positive reports that are coming out about that daily. The plans are not clear yet since the vaccine has not been approved by the FDA. But I think many of our efforts and our capabilities through our fixed sites as well as mobile sites, our unique partnership with CORE to deliver some of those services, can all come into play as we continue to do what we know to do now, but also prepare for a future where the vaccine is available.
And while I got you here, sir, any additional updates that you care to share?
Well, the other update is we are beginning to think about 2021. It is upon us. We still have an election to execute in 2021, which will be for the runoff of 2 Senate races in Georgia. And if you think about the attention that we got in November, you could probably say it's going to be equal in January. So we still have work to do in that area in support of Rick Barron and his team.
Dick Anderson, always a pleasure, sir. Thanks again for your time.
Shania, again, thank you. And again, I breathe a huge sigh of relief that the elections are behind us and we had such a good result. But I also know that we've got plenty of challenges going forward. And I, again, thank you for this opportunity to be able to describe some of those for 2021 and beyond.